Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Baroness album, Purple, Savannah, Georgia metal band, Baroness. On their fourth full-length album here with this release, and one of the most respected, grandest, and most progressive sludge metal acts out there today. And their last full-length LP, Green and Yellow, was a pretty huge undertaking given that it was a double album, but a double album that saw mixed reviews from some hardcore fans because the band kind of changed pace, changed sound a little bit. The tracks on this LP placed a larger emphasis on hooks and just a generally more psychedelic sound. Kind of reminded me what Mastodon was doing with The Hunter, but maybe a little bit better. I liked the LP overall, but undeniably it was kind of bloated. If only we could get a Baroness album that brought forward this increase in melody, more hooks, but was hard-hitting like their earlier releases, and sort of boiled the record down to its best elements rather than giving us so many tracks to pick through. If that would happen, we'd just be set, and that's kind of what happens on Purple. Some fans have even been observant enough to observe that Purple, being a combination of red and blue, might mean that the band is fusing those two records together for a sound that sort of is the best of both worlds with their two earliest albums. And personally, I don't know about that. I don't think this album quite sounds like that, but I will say that I think quite a bit of the material here can certainly go toe-to-toe with a lot of Baroness's earlier work. It's not quite as explosive or as aggressive as the Red or the Blue album, but Baroness, I think, improved greatly upon a lot of the ideas they were experimenting with on Green and Yellow. This LP flows incredibly well from the start to the finish, as it just transitions from one anthemic sludge metal smash to the next. The opening track on this thing, Morningstar, is a great kick off to the album. The devilish tight riffs on the intro are really exhilarating and make me feel like I am just speeding through the clouds in the middle of a thunderstorm. The track becomes really warm and melodic and harmonious during the solo passage. It's awesomely melodic, I think really easy to listen to for people who aren't really into more extreme forms of metal, but it's also visceral and really overwhelming, in the way that a great metal album should be. This track is followed by one of my favorite cuts on the album, Shock Man! I love the driving drums on this track, what sounds like tremolo pick guitars, but, really chunky, down-tuned, beefy stuff, and it's really tense. It just really keeps me on the edge of my seat with this track. And John Baisley's vocals, his lyrics on this song, in a battle you only brought your shield. I sung that a little fast there, and my voice did not really do it justice, but the vocals, the lyrics on this thing, a lot of the time are very righteous and powerful, poetic and vivid in their descriptions. There are moments on this LP where John is really channeling his inner James Hetfield, and as long as I'm making comparisons here, I think there's a touch of King Crimson influence on this thing, as well as a little bit of Foo Fighters too. To continue on this Shock Me track, I love the grand, harmonious ascending and descending chords that power their way up to the chorus, which just kind of bursts with this Shock Me vocal refrain, and the incredibly righteous and triumphant tunes continue deeper into the album. Tracks that balance bombastic riffs and drums with some really melodic and beautiful guitar passages as well, especially on Kerosene, which has an incredibly climactic ending. Though I will say one issue with these tracks and a few other tracks here is that Baroness, and this is an issue I've had with their music in the past, they tend to be really maximal when it comes to their instrumental layers, which at times leads to some really weird mixing and instrument placement where the vocals, the drums, the acoustic guitars, and the electric guitars kind of feel like in a standing position that they wouldn't normally be in other mixes. Maybe the drums and acoustic guitar are super loud while the vocals and electric guitars are kind of lower in the mix. The record trips into the very somber fugue, which is like a little bit of an intermission in the middle of the album, which was a pretty nice change of pace. And the song Chlorine and Wine, which is not only one of the heaviest and most powerful and harmonious songs on here, but the tune at the core of this track I could see being stripped back to like an acoustic version and it would still sound great. It has a bit of an old English medieval folk tune vibe to some of the melodies laced into it. And there's a huge finish to this track too that I love. Now, the last several tracks on here, the album's final moments, I think could have done with a bit more variety or another musical change of pace, especially given that this record isn't really that long of an album. We've got kind of 9 full-length tracks running out at about 43 minutes. The song Iron Bell I thought was a decent track, but the very tense guitars and drumming on here, it's really throttling, it's visceral, but it doesn't bring anything to the table that the previous tracks didn't already. Although I will say the song If I Have to Wake Up is an awesomely powerful finisher, which just has this powerful sadness to it that I don't often hear in a lot of newer metal music. Often the songs are kind of oriented around just insane levels of anger, whereas this kind of pulls that veil back a little bit to reveal some serious emotional torture going on. Overall, I think this is a great record, and I'm really glad I got to review it before the year was out. I was kind of skeptical as to why Baroness would be releasing an album so late into the year, but they definitely threw a 3-point shot as the clock was running out and really just pulled together a great metal record. Certainly better than Green and Yellow, and again, I think on par with what they've put out in the past, even if some metal fans don't realize it. Sure, it is a bit of a change of pace and a change of sound. It's still really hooky, like Green and Yellow was, but you can't deny that they're doing it better here. And with bands like Ghost having a pretty fantastic album release this year, it would seem that the core melodic fundamentals of songwriting are taking hold once again in some pretty prominent metal records in 2015. I love the tunes on this thing, the performances are great, the production a lot of the time, like I said, that instrumental placement could be wonky occasionally, but it's more on point than it is off. A lot of the guitar solos are great and really refreshing, which is usually the case for Baroness. Nothing new there. And yeah, I don't know if there's much else I can say about this album. If you're looking for a progressive metal record that is also really catchy, direct, enthralling, and engaging, then give this album a listen. I'm feeling a strong 8 on this thing. Transition. Have you given this album a listen? 2015 album reviews are done. They're over. List week, classics week coming up. Album reviews will resume once again in 2016. You're the best. Anthony Fantano, music, fly!